to me.
Information, news, and entertainment on demand.
WSRadio.com.
Welcome to This Week in Marketing, brought to you by the San Diego chapter of the American Marketing Association.
You may have heard me brag about Progressive Medical Center and just how much they've helped me with my health. And Dr. Goley, one thing that you have helped so many people with is migraines.
Unfortunately, there are millions and millions of Americans who are suffering with migraines and headaches, and they're debilitating because it affects the quality of their life, and they cannot function properly. At Progressive, we get the root cause because we understand that migraines could be caused by nutritional deficiencies, hormonal imbalances, believe it or not, delayed food sensitivities. And once we determine what the real reason is, we put a plan of action together with medication that we get them off slowly, and we put them on an all-natural approach, and the results are amazing.
Incredible. I mean, there's so many people that can say they don't live their lives with migraines anymore thanks to Progressive Medical Center.
And that's what's exciting and rewarding to us as physicians, because we help our patients take control of their health, and that's why they're living well.
Why don't you get a hold of Progressive Medical Center today? Don't live in pain. Don't have migraines anymore. Just go to their website, progressivemedicalcenter.com.
This is your life. Live it well.
You take your smartphone almost everywhere you go. Now WSRadio.com can be there too. Search WS Radio in the Play Store for your Android devices or iTunes for Apple, and download the WS Radio application. WSRadio.com, on your phone and in your ear everywhere you go. Download the WS Radio application. Do it now. It's very easy. WSRadio.com.
Thank you for listening to WS Radio. Improve your business and your life with useful information from experts and thought leaders. WS Radio is radio with ROI.
You may have heard me brag about Progressive Medical Center and just how much they've helped me with my health. And Dr. Goley, one thing that you have helped so many people with is migraines.
Unfortunately, there are millions and millions of Americans who are suffering with migraines and headaches, and they're debilitating because it affects the quality of their life, and they cannot function properly. At Progressive, we get the root cause because we understand that migraines could be caused by nutritional deficiencies, hormonal imbalances, believe it or not, delayed food sensitivities. And once we determine what the real reason is, we put a plan of action together with medication that we get them off slowly, and we put them on an all-natural approach, and the results are amazing.
Incredible. I mean, there's so many people that can say they don't live their lives with migraines anymore thanks to Progressive Medical Center.
And that's what's exciting and rewarding to us as physicians, because we help our patients take control of their health, and that's why they're living well.
Why don't you get a hold of Progressive Medical Center today? Don't live in pain. Don't have migraines anymore. Just go to their website, progressivemedicalcenter.com.
This is your life. Live it well.
Talk to me.
Information, news, and entertainment on demand.
WSRadio.com.
Welcome to This Week in Marketing, brought to you by the San Diego chapter of the American Marketing Association.
All right. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Marketing, hosted by WSRadio.com and AMA San Diego. I'm your host, Sam Wheeler, and today we are talking about strategic marketing plans. We have a great guest today, Jack Chirrick, the principal of Now You Know. They're a consulting agency based here in San Diego. Good morning, Jack. How's it going?
I'm doing great, Sam. How about yourself?
Pretty good, pretty good. New year, new podcast. Love it. This is our first one this year. We have a great show today talking about everything from, why you need a strategic communications plan, what it entails, the KPIs, all that good stuff. But before we kick off into that, I want to remind all our listeners out there that the Art of Marketing Conference is quickly approaching. April 5th, 2019. It's at the Marriott Del Mar. It's a great venue. There's going to be tons of speakers, tons of tracks. It's a really great show for in-house and agency marketers alike. And we've got a few speakers confirmed already. Cheryl Goodman, the head of corporate communications at Sony Electronics. Seth Odell, vice chancellor of marketing at the National University System. And Michael Farrington, vice president of global marketing at NuVasive Inc. So there's going to be about, I think there's 4 to 6 tracks. I don't think we've finalized all the breakout sessions and speakers yet, but it's going to be a lot of fun. Highly recommend joining. We have early bird member pricing. It ends January 20th. AMA members are $129. Non-members are $249. And I believe it goes up to $20. It goes up $20 from January 21st to March 31st, and then up another $40 to $199 April 1st through April 5th. So register and save, and there also is packages for companies and all that good stuff. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I went to it last year. It was great, and I highly recommend it. So we are talking about strategic communications plan. Okay, you know what? I think the best question to start off, Jack, is what is that even? Like, how do you even unpack that? Or maybe not what is it, but what is the purpose of it? Why do companies need to invest in coming up with this type of thing?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, I think that, we all need targets, right? Otherwise, we're kind of aimless and, just really are all over the place. So I think the first thing you really want to do when you're talking about a strategic plan is, creating an overarching plan that really seeks to align all of your communications efforts. So that includes your marketing, your public relations, your advertising. That really has to come from both of an internal and an external perspective, right? Because I think all communication starts from the internal side of things. So if your organization doesn't have a sense of self, has a sense of purpose, then it's very difficult for you to be able to communicate that outside of your organization. So what you really want to do is really kind of codify who your key stakeholders are, what your desired objectives are, specifically your core messaging, and then the channels of delivery. So this really just builds the framework of understanding what issues you want to resolve for others out in the real world. So you kind of start with why, right? Simon Sinek says, start with why. That's the thing. When you build an organization or you build a product, what is it that you're trying to help other people with at the end of the day?
Okay, I love that. So what kind of, when you say key stakeholders, is this communications plan solely within the marketing department of a company, or who's involved here?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I think it has to be, your marketing team, your public relations team, your advertising team. But I mean, it's got to also be the employees themselves. But when we talk about stakeholders, that's just your internal stakeholder core. And then you have to look at, who your stakeholders are outside of that. And I mean, that really is going to depend on, what your product is. It's going to be very different, if your product is a politician who you're trying to get elected, versus trying to sell the next greatest widget on the market. Because, in some cases, there's going to be communication issues like, perhaps environmental issues. So stakeholders might be politicians if your product has an environmental effect, or there's a law that specifically, defines how it is that you have to operate. So you need to make sure that you're looking at all of those stakeholders when you're developing your strategic plan, because what you don't want to do is start to develop your messaging, your channels and everything, and not speak to a key constituency group, because that's going to create problems for you in the future.
Okay, I know this question is probably, the answer is going to be highly dependent. But before, after you identify the stakeholders and your objectives and you have your core messaging, right? You're kind of working on all of this process. What are the type of metrics that you should set for yourself? And is there kind of like a process for setting these, or, any type of guideline for people that are, starting to undertake this huge process themselves?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's going to be dependent. Again, you go back to what's your product, right? If it's trying to get somebody elected, then your goal is getting that person elected. If you're trying to sell a product, then I think you really have to look at exactly what is it that you're trying to do with that product, and, what's driving it at the end of the day, right? So, ultimately, when you're creating your metrics, you want to make sure that your objectives are smart, right? I mean, first and foremost, that they're specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound. We've all been taught this. It's proven time and time again, to create success. The other thing is that, you really want to start with the desired outcome at the end of the day. What's driving the need for the outcome? And, that could be something as simple as, you're a company that's come up with a new product that you need to generate revenue for, R&D, right? It could be a matter of just, hey, I've got all of these employees that I need to pay. That's not the driving force behind your strategic communications plan, but it really defines how you're going to build out your objectives. So you also want to be looking at your historic performance and look at, what marketing data talks about in terms of conversions and, how people react to certain things. So to kind of give you an example, I kind of came up with my own SMART objective for the nonprofit world. So acquire 40 new donations to support a capital campaign for nonprofit X within the next 3 months. So like I said, you start at the beginning of, what's driving that need. What's driving that need is that you need to come up with $4,000 to fill a funding gap, in your capital campaign. So that's to build a building. So you know that you need $4,000. So that's your target revenue goal. From there, you want to take a look at, each giver, and you operate under the assumption that each of the individuals that you're going to target are going to provide $1,000. And so that tells you that, how many individuals you're going to need to go out and get is 40 to, reach that $4,000 funding gap. And then you know that it's timely, right? You know that all funds need to be collected within the next 3 months to meet expenses on time. And then that kind of goes to the next step, right, of strategic development. So you're market targeting, based on the conversion data, that you're going to have to get at least 2,000, potential donors. You're going to have to touch at least 2,000 people to get the 40 that you want, which is then going to allow you to develop your messaging and identify your channels from there.
Okay, I love that. Man, you're a pro here, stopping it right at the right time. We'll be back. WSRadio.com. This is This Week in Marketing, hosted by AMA San Diego.
Information, news, and entertainment on demand. WSRadio.com.
Welcome to This Week in Marketing, brought to you by the San Diego chapter of the American Marketing Association.
All right, welcome back to This Week in Marketing. I'm your host, Sam Wheeler. We're talking with Jack Chirrick, and we're talking strategic communications. We just had a fantastic example shown, talked about in the nonprofit world, which I loved. But before we kind of continue this conversation, let's step back a second. And Jack, can you give us kind of like a little bit of bio about yourself, a little bit of bio about your company, and kind of, what got you into this marketing / communications realm that you're in now?
Well, back in 1991, I made the decision to join the Navy. It was when our country was at war with Iraq for the first time during the Gulf War. And I didn't actually go into the communications field initially. I went in as a personnel specialist, so I was essentially in HR. After doing that for about 2 years, I came across an individual who was a military journalist. And writing had always been a passion of mine when I was younger. And so it was really something that appealed to me. And so I converted into that, community of journalism. And then eventually from there, as I, progressed through the ranks in the military, eventually I started moving further away from journalism and more into public affairs, public relations, marketing, et cetera. And I got out of the military back in 2012. Following, that stint in the military, I landed at an organization called Operation Homefront. It's a military nonprofit that seeks to build strong, stable, and secure military families. And I worked for them as their executive director in Southern California initially, and then was eventually promoted to regional director, where I had 5 states under my control. So a lot of what I did in that time was not only, strategic communications planning, but, strategic business planning as a whole. But so much of that is critical and wrapped up in your communications plan, because if you're not communicating who you are as an organization, it's very difficult to develop revenue. Back in March of last year, I really wanted to kind of branch out. I had done that for 5.5 years. I wanted to find a new opportunity where I could really help other organizations. And when I started thinking about that, a good friend of mine had suggested I, start my own consulting firm. And I really wanted to make sure that if I did that, that I wasn't just, another consulting firm out there that was offering the same level of services. And what I feel is that a lot of organizations tend to focus very tactically. We've got a product that we want to sell, so we need to create an advertisement to sell that product. And so, it happens within that very, small space. But by ignoring the larger capacity, I think sometimes you can have channel misalignment. Give you a great example of that. There's a grocer that has a billboard up by my house that says that, they sell their product cheaper than their competitor. And the nearest one of those branded stores is actually about 15 miles away. However, literally not but 200 yards down the street in the direction facing the billboard is their competitor.
I love that.
Yeah. So, placement's all wrong. So, they've got this idea that, we need to be out there and we need to be advertising, but they're not looking at it strategically. They're not making sure that the right message is being put in the right place. And so I knew that that was really a strong suit of mine that I had developed in the military, that I had developed during, the 5.5 years working for Operation Homefront. And I wanted to be able to offer that to others. So I really designed Now You Know with the concept of helping small and mid-sized businesses and nonprofits develop strategic communications so that they really maximize the potential, of what they're doing through marketing, public relations, and advertising.
Okay, great. I love that overview. Thank you. So that's kind of actually a really good segue into, kind of a really big question that I've was thinking about since, while we were prepping for the show, but who is in charge of this, right? You've got your marketing director, you've got PR director, they all have their own, people and channel that they're responsible for. You have the CEO and the COO and this ELT, right? Who in a company, obviously I think the answer is it depends, but on some of these small to mid-sized companies, right? Who is in charge of this, right? Who should be taking the lead on any type of interdepartmental project like this?
Yeah, first off, I would say yes. I think all of those people are responsible at some level, right? I think the buck obviously stops with the CEO, but depending on the sophistication and the size of the organization, of course, that's going to be a marketing director or a communications director. But what I'm striving for here is an integrated approach, right? And I think that when you start looking at organizations that think that way, they're very siloed. So marketing's over here doing their thing, PR's over here doing their thing, and then marketing's kind of working, with advertising through the sales department, et cetera. And again, that's how you create, misalignment of messaging, because they're developing this message core, perhaps from the organization's mission, vision, value principles, the product that they're selling. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're communicating about it in the same way that the public relations team is communicating about it. So it's really a matter of coming in and getting somebody to accept responsibility as the key stakeholder, right? They're going to help to own the project. And then from there, I think everybody else needs to be an invested team member in that project. Not necessarily subordinate. I think that it does have to be a collaborative process. There needs to be a level of equality. I think otherwise you create division, right? Well, I'm marketing, so I'm going to be in charge, or I'm PR, or I'm going to be in charge. It's really about creating that harmony of approach so that, when you're communicating to that external audience, it really resonates. It's like a drum beat that just, keeps thumping along, one tap at a time.
Okay, cool. I like that you didn't say hire a consulting agency to do it. But
that's one approach.
But maybe, I think that might be a pretty solid approach to get started, right? Especially if you have somebody on the team who's never done it before, or you have nowhere to start, right? There's a good opportunity to bring in a professional, somebody that can give you kind of like a playbook and help coach everybody into, not coach into submission, I guess, but get everybody to play by the same playbook, right? So when we're looking for that approach, how do you generally go into a company, and what's the plan of attack there when hiring for a position like this?
So, from my perspective, when I go into a company, how do I work with them? Or on the flip side of that, should they be looking for?
I like both of those, actually. So maybe let's start with company side, right? When you're going to think about hiring an outside agency or consulting firm to to, put together a plan, what should they be looking for, right? Or what kind of questions should they ask, and how should they prep for a project like this?
Right. First and foremost, I think that, what the organization should be looking for, when they're looking to hire a consultant, is the work itself, right? And that can really vary because that also depends on an organization's budget, So, somebody who may have a very deep portfolio may be more expensive than a company can afford. So, I would say, don't necessarily look at the depth of the portfolio, look at the quality of work that's being provided. And, even if you're a new organization, like, you talk about nonprofits that don't have these huge budgets to invest into, their communications products, they can even look at a marketing intern. I mean, even a marketing intern has work that they can bring from school and say, hey, this is what I've done. This is how I think. This is the capability that I bring to the table. So I think that, that's where you start, right? Is you have to look at the work and the capability of the individual and what they're providing. I think when you start looking at larger organizations, you also want to be looking at success metrics, like when they've actually have, legitimate projects under their belt, like how have they moved the needle for other organizations? Price is always going to be a consideration. I think also team synergy, right? I mean, you got to have a good feeling about the organization that you're working with. So I think that you want to know who's going to do the work. Oftentimes, an agency will come out and, there will be a business development person or, the principal of the organization that's actually selling the business day to day, but it's actually somebody else who's doing the work in-house. So you want to get a sense of who those people are, what they've done. And I think, by really bringing all of that together, I think it gives you a pretty clear snapshot, of how you're going to feel about working with that organization and what it is that they're going to be able to do for you.
Okay, cool. I love that. And for those, a lot of our listeners out there are also consultants themselves. Mm-hmm. If somebody comes to them and says, like, hey, can you, we need you to help with this project or something, right? What's the best plan of attack? So feel free not to answer this because I know it's a tough one, but, how do you get people to listen and to follow along, right? 'Cause especially, I work at agency and we find all the time where we're like, hey, you guys should do this. You're paying us to tell you what to do. And then nobody does it, right? So what's the plan for kind of commanding, helping people or supporting people to follow, this project?
Right. So I think that really starts with, first off, you need that platform, right? You need the strategic communications plan in place. So that, comes with starting, with an open mind and listening, going into the organization and asking far more questions than, giving, advice. That's going to allow you to build that plan. But then I think that you have to build sub-plans into that, right? I mean, people have to know, and this is where the internal communications piece is so critical, is everybody needs to understand what their role is in the effort. You can sit there and say that somebody in the billing department, well, I'm not involved with communications, so how does this communications plan apply to me? It doesn't, right? And so they kind of just go off in their own little world, and they ignore what everything is. But the thing is if you as a customer call that billing department and you speak with that individual becomes the voice of your brand. They become the voice of your organization. They are your product for all practical intents and purposes. So if the customer has a poor interaction with them, then that becomes reflective of the entire brand, right? So it's important that they understand what their role is in the communications process. So it's about building the larger communications plan and then working with individual supervisors to build sub-plans for their team so that they can go out to them and communicate internally and say, this is how you contribute to the larger picture. This is your role. I want them to share those ideas, right? When you build out that messaging and you talk about your core communication ideas, you want to make sure that every single person in the organization knows what that messaging is and, as much as humanly possible, believes it and is invested in it just as much as the CEO of the organization.
Okay, cool. I love that. I'm going to kind of, ask a follow-up question here, a little specific, but, with some of these customer touch points that we're talking about, I love the idea of like working with the managers to like make sure they're kind of engaged here, right? I think that's a really good approach. Now, my question is, when you talk about like your core messaging, right? How, from a customer service or a billing person standpoint, like how is it more complicated than just being friendly to them, right? And being like, hey, how's it going? Let me fix this issue for you. Thank you. Have a good day, right?
Right.
What else is involved in that core messaging besides being friendly to your customers?
Well, they need to be the product, again, at the end of the day. When you think about, let's take Apple as an example, right? You think of the culture that's been built around Apple, the coolness, the hipness. That customer service representative needs to represent that as well. That's why when you walk into the Apple store, what do you see? You see a bunch of people in T-shirts and, they exhibit and they really, shine through with that lifestyle. You can see where that's really kind of gone down to the core, right? That's not just at the CEO level. That's not just in the, marketing products that they put out on a billboard. I mean, it's down to that individual that's right there at the touch point directly with the customer. They epitomize the brand. And that's exactly what you want to happen at the end of the day, to really communicate effectively with your, audience, the people that you're trying to help.
So clothes are part of the messaging as well.
Yeah, that kind of goes back to it. Like, when I think about branding, it's a lot of different things, right? I mean, it has to do with, at its core, it's the idea of what it is that you're trying to solve, but there's surface level as well.
All right, I love that. We're going to segue into branding and communicating with the audience next. This is WSRadio.com, This Week in Marketing by the AMA San Diego. See you in a sec.
Can you imagine a world without children? A world where children don't play, or dream, or imagine?
At St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, we're working every day to find cures for diseases that strike down children, because we can't imagine a world without children. Can you?
Finding cures, saving children. St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. To learn how you can help, log on to our website, stjude.org.
Tired of presentations with no impact, no inspiration, and no traction? Do dull speakers have you and your team disengaged and distracted by smartphones? Christopher McCullough brings energy, insights, and 2 decades of experience, delivered with punch, humor, and heart. Your team will leave energized, uplifted, and with a sense of purpose. Visit ChristopherMcCullough.com to bring some heat to your next speaking engagement. McCulloughe. ChristopherMcCullough.com.
Take a break from politics. Tune in and learn something. WS Radio shows are worth your time and are filled with tips and advice. Add us to your lunch routine, and we'll give you a meal for your mind.
Kenja Dixon was crowned the #1 sales executive through hard work, deep thinking, and the revelation of universal talk laws. He now wants to share these lessons with you. Universal talk laws are what you need to know and use in business and at home to have successful and effective conversations. Kenja Dixon shares his wisdom, action plans, and wealth. Each book comes with a chance to win $10,000. Find Universal Talk Laws at KenjaDixon.com.
Do you want to be a professional coach? Are you in business trying to make a real difference with people you manage or work with? Have you started a coaching practice that isn't quite getting off the ground? Get the skills you need to be a successful coach today with the Coaches Training Program from Accomplishment Coaching. The Coaches Training Program will show you how to help others focus and be more fulfilled. Whether you want to improve your company's bottom line or create a thriving coaching practice, Accomplishment Coaching can give you the distinctions and practices you need to coach others effectively today. Accomplishment Coaching has spent 6 years developing a cutting-edge coaches training program that will have you ready to coach people professionally in just 12 months, and you don't have to take time off work to do it. To find out more about the Coaches Training Program, just call 1-888-548-6813. That's 1-888-548-6813.
Small businesses are the lifeblood of America's economy. Every Thursday, SBA Radio interviews industry professionals and is dedicated to provide small businesses with timely insights and innovations. Visit www.sbaradio.us for details.
Talk to me.
Information, news, and entertainment on demand.
WSRadio.com.
Welcome to This Week in Marketing, brought to you by the San Diego chapter of the American Marketing Association.
All right, welcome back to This Week in Marketing. I'm your host, Sam Wheeler. We're talking with Jack Chirrick of Now You Know. It's a consulting agency based here in San Diego. Jack has a pretty rich history of strategic communications and supporting businesses, so it's been a pretty good conversation so far. We started talking a little bit about branding and kind of audience communication right before the break, so I'd like to continue with that. During the break we were talking kind of about missed touch points, so that's kind of what I wanted to ask Jack about first here is, are there anything you think about, okay, so our commercials on TV or our, website, right? Are there any other touch points that are often overlooked that you find in your, when you're building out a communications plan? And, what are some of the ones that are usually underdeveloped as well?
Sure, absolutely. One of the things, you look at the front desk, like a reception desk, right? Not a lot of people necessarily interact at that level, but that creates an impression. Every single employee that has a social media, channel of their own becomes a communicator for the organization. So as an example, imagine that you have an employee that raves on their social media channel about how great your competitor's product is, that they just bought it. Like, what does that say about you and your organization? Take Chevy and Ford. If I worked for Ford and I was raving about the Chevy that I just bought, like, what would you think about Ford at that point? Yeah,
I wonder if there's rules about doing that, right? Especially from the bigger brands. Like, if you work at Chevy, can you just buy a Ford and drive around a Ford? Probably not. They probably have incentives for you or something, right?
Well, I think, that's kind of one way to do it, right? Is you incentivize the employee by giving them, a discount to buy Ford versus Chevy, or, the other way around, depending on who you work for. I don't think you can obviously stop individuals from purchasing other products, but I do think that, if you really have an effective communications plan, not only have you sold your external customer on the reality that you've got the best product on the market, right? Not only have you shared that with them, but you've also proven it to your employees. Your employees know that you have the best product on the market, so they're going to want that.
Yeah, I love that. So this is something that, a lot of smaller companies struggle with, right? Where you look at, I have a couple friends that work up in Seattle and some of those big businesses up there, right? And they're all Amazon, all in, right? Or all Microsoft all day. So how do you get, we talked about working with the ELT and the managers and, that type of thing. But what are some tips for, smaller companies to get their employees to, like, I don't want to say drink the Kool-Aid, but to be all in for the company, right? Do you just look for those individuals when you're hiring, or is it more of like a learning approach to kind of teach them why it's important?
I think that, part of it starts with hiring. I've always loved the phrase, you hire for attitude, not skills. Skills can be taught, attitude can't. So I think that at the beginning, when any company looks for an employee, they should be looking at, attitude and motivation and, some of those soft skills first and foremost. After that, though, let's just be honest. Not everybody is going to be all in all the time. But if you want that, if you want to strive toward that, if you want to develop that possibility, again, it starts with communicating. And I think a lot of, organizations, when they think about communication, they think about it, from an external perspective. Let's talk about who we are to our customer. Let's let them know why our product's better than, the organization over there. And by failing to really internalize that process and creating lines of communication with their employees, they really miss a wonderful opportunity to, take this, organic sales force that they have. As an example, when I worked for Operation Homefront, because of my passion and commitment to the organization, My aunt actually ended up donating a very large sum of money to the organization. I didn't even know that she had, because it made her believe, right? So I didn't even go to her and directly say, hey, can you make a donation to the organization? Just because of my passion, collateral, right? I mean, it was a collateral impact that caused her to want to do that. And it's the same thing with these employees. If they really get invested into whatever your product happens to be, they're going to talk about it. And so you need to communicate with them. And again, you need to prove to them. And that's more than just creating an employee newsletter. Like when a lot of organizations think about, particularly large organizations, they think about those internal communications channels. It's like, well, we'll just do a newsletter. And then they send that newsletter out to all of the employees. And then none of the employees read those newsletters. And thereby, the brand doesn't resonate from the inside out. So it's more than that. I think it's about getting face-to-face with people, talking to them, letting them ask questions, better defining, what their role is in the process. And by doing that, you show them that they have value and they give value back to the organization. And then they are going to be your greatest brand ambassadors at the end of the day.
Okay. Yeah, that is fantastic. That I know that Zuckerberg does like a fireside chat, I think like once a month with everybody at the company, or anybody can kind of go and ask questions. I'm sure the line for that question though is like 1,000,000 miles long, but that's really interesting. And so I guess we got to kind of take a step back. We skipped over kind of the development of the core messaging. So we talked about how you people that are involved, how you communicated out to the your audience, right? What kind of tips can you give a company or a marketing team or whatever that's working on this project to develop the core messaging, right? We've kind of skirted around it, but I think this is a good opportunity to kind of talk about the development. I think that there's a few things we could talk about here.
Right. Well, everything starts, with a problem that needs to be solved, right? And I don't really want to use the word problem because I don't think that's fair, but providing something, a service, a product that makes somebody's life better, that resolves, an issue for them. So it starts there, right? I mean, you really do have to have a marketable product at the end of the day. You really do need to be making a difference in somebody else's life. Because if you're not doing that, then there's no need for anyone to consume that particular product, and thereby you have no market to tap into. But the other thing that you want to make sure that you're doing, I think, is, really knowing that your product solves a particular problem doesn't mean that your customer does. So, you need to figure out, okay, how do we message to where they understand that we know what their problem is and that this is the solution to it, right? And that really comes through with storytelling by, creating the opportunity for the, consumer to envision themselves as the hero of that story, and you showing them that you can be that guide, along their journey to show them that, this can really help them be the hero at the end of the day. So it starts there. And then, at that point, that's where you really need to be sure that your product can deliver on the promise. If your product doesn't deliver on the promise, then ultimately what you're going to have is, brand conflict in the marketplace between what you're saying that you do and what your customers are saying that you do. A great book called The Brand Gap, says, your brand is not what you say it is, it's what they say it is.
Yeah, I was actually just going to bring that up. So I'm glad that you talked about that. So at what point do you've got a whole slew of industries, right? When you're creating a marketing plan, you say, all right, this is what we think the vision is, this is what we think the problem is, this is how we think people are going to react to it, right? And then at what point do you say, well, actually, we need to pivot, right? Because, a great example of this is Pedialyte, right? They said, hey, this is for sick babies. And then all of a sudden, people were like, actually, we're using it for hangovers. Right. And, last time I was in Vegas, I saw them there was like literally probably dozens of Pedialyte, either employees or, somebody that they hired to come and pass out Pedialyte packets with like, shot eye or like red eyeballs saying like, feel better in the morning or whatever. Right. So, at what point do you pivot your strategy?
Maybe you don't. I think that comes from a sense of, who you are as an organization. If you're really trying to help others and you're really trying to make a difference in their lives, Pedialyte is still for babies, right? It's not that that's changed. Just because somebody else found another source for that product, doesn't necessarily mean that the core of the organization has changed. And that's where you really need to sit down and make a decision because, think about it. If Pedialyte went out and they started an entire marketing campaign, going after individuals who are, who have hangovers, what would that do to their baby market? And is that worth risking that? I think that, that can have a life of its own because Pedialyte is a great product. But at their core, who are they? What is their vision, for a better future? How do they do that through their mission? And then, how does the product do that for their customer? And I think that, in the case of Pedialyte, they stay true to themselves. I think if you're an organization that is finding that your core product really didn't solve the problem of the intended audience that you had designed it for, and there's a secondary audience that has picked it up, at that point there may be a need for a pivot, right? It's like you come to the realization that, wow, the market that I thought I was in is not the market that I really should be in. And, we need to, that's where you need to rethink branding, right? You need to go back to the drawing board and re-examine your value proposition, re-examine your mission and, who it is that you can help.
Awesome. I love that. I think we said we were going to talk about branding in this segment, but we just got to it. Good conversation, though. We're going to talk about branding in the final segment here. This is This Week in Marketing by AMA San Diego and WSRadio.com. Thank you.
You take your smartphone almost everywhere you go. Now WSRadio.com can be there too. Search WS Radio in the Play Store for your Android devices or iTunes for Apple and download the WS Radio application. WSRadio.com on your phone and in your ear everywhere you go. Download the WS Radio application. Do it now. It's very easy. WSRadio.com.
On the internet, your business's reputation can be unjustly destroyed in an instant. Don't wait for that to happen. Building and marketing your 5-star reputation can increase your business by as much as 19%. Take control of your reputation and have the 5-star reputation you deserve with Reputation Marketing Solutions by DSI Development. Become the go-to company by visiting 5starrepmarketing.com. The number 5starrepmarketing.com.
Nowadays, internet devices are an integral part of your home. Everyone in your family has a smartphone, tablet, or a computer. Life is easier knowing that all your devices are secured and your family can surf the internet carefree. ESET Multi-Device Security Pack does just that. One license for all your devices. With ESET, it's simple to stay protected and save money. Enjoy safer technology with ESET Multi-Device Security Pack at ESET.com. That's ESET.com.
You may have heard me brag about Progressive Medical Center and just how much they've helped me with my health. And Dr. Goley, one thing that you've helped so many people with is migraines.
Unfortunately, there are millions and millions of Americans who are suffering with migraines and headaches, and they're debilitating because it affects the quality of their life, and they cannot function properly. At Progressive, we get to the root cause because we understand that migraines could be caused by nutritional deficiencies, hormonal imbalances, believe it or not, delayed food sensitivities. And once we determine what the real reason is, we put a plan of action together with medication that we get them off slowly, and we put them on an all-natural approach, and the results are amazing.
Incredible. I mean, there's so many people that can say they don't live their lives with migraines anymore thanks to Progressive Medical Center.
And that's what's exciting and rewarding to us as physicians because we help our patients take control of their health, and that's why they're living well.
Why don't you get a hold of Progressive Medical Center today? Don't live in pain. Don't have migraines anymore. Just go to their website, progressivemedicalcenter.com.
This is your life. Live it well.
Did you know the majority of radio listeners are between the ages of 35 and 54, have a household income of more than $100,000, are classified as executives or professionals, and share the show they listen to? Become part of the Peggy Smedley Show to reach listeners looking for information on connected devices through cost-effective radio commercials or segment sponsorships. Contact us at 630-933-0844 for more information or visit PeggySmedleyShow.com.
Talk to me.
Information, news, and entertainment on demand.
WSRadio.com.
Welcome to This Week in Marketing, brought to you by the San Diego chapter of the American Marketing Association.
All right, welcome back to This Week in Marketing. We're here with Jack Chirrick of Now You Know agency, our consulting agency. It's been a great conversation, and we still have a lot to catch up on. We will put some further reading examples in the show notes and in the write-up as well for those of you that want to learn more about this. And you can also contact Jack at your leisure as well. So we talked about how to resonate with your audience, and we started talking a little bit about branding, but how does your branding tie in, right? I mean, for a lot of companies that are like, oh, crap, we need to build a strategic marketing plan, they've already kind of built their brand out, right? So how does it tie into creating a new plan or making it work?
Right. Well, first, let's define what we mean by brand, right? I think that's a great place to start because I think that, some organizations, particularly smaller ones, when they think of branding, they think about a logo. They think about fonts. They think about, color scheme and, how that embodies who they are. That is not brand. That is a representation of brand. So, when I talk about branding in that regard, I like to think of it as a person, right? So like your clothes or your logo, the way that you speak, is your font. And then your color scheme is, maybe how you do your hair or if you wear makeup or anything like that. So all of that has an external physical expression of who you are. But that doesn't necessarily mean brand. Brand is who you are at your core, what it is that you believe, what it is that you think. And it's the same thing as an organization, right? It's the promise that you deliver that defines what your brand is. And then how that promise interacts within the marketplace determines what your brand is. So those two things coming together define brand. What happens is that individuals then associate that reality with the logos, the fonts, and the colors, right? And so it becomes a snapshot. When they see that logo, they automatically have those feelings about your organization that you're trying to represent through your product. So that's when we're talking about brand, that's what we mean. And so if an organization truly has a sense of self, a sense of brand, what their product is, then that just makes it that much easier to come in because, what you're really trying to do at that point when you're there at the assessment phase is coming in and saying, okay, we already have a very strong understanding of who we are. What is it that we're trying to do? And who is it that we're trying to do it for, right? So basically, at that point, you're talking market selection, and then after that, you can, very easily develop your messaging. So you really kind of skip that entire process of, developing who you are as an organization if that's already set up front, which is so much easier.
Okay, cool. Love that. So, you've got your plan, you've got your core messaging, everything's kind of all tied up. How do you pick the channels for your message delivery, right? Obviously, it's easy to understand that, well, once it's easy to understand that, okay, customer service needs to be on point here, your front desk, your, any other type of salespeople or whatever, right? How do you pick the actual channels for, getting this message out?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of analogies, so I'm going to answer that with a very simple phrase: fish where the fish are. So as an example of that, let's say that you work for, a retirement home, right? Are you going to be selecting Facebook or Snapchat as your primary channel of communication? I'm thinking not, right? Like if you truly understand your audience, then you understand that that's not where they are, right? That's not the pond that they're in. So you really have to define, who your audience is, know what their specific issue is. Going to the example of the retirement home, they're looking for some place that they can go and relax, maybe play some golf, meet some people their own age that have similar interests, that has a great community around it. And so by understanding, that framework for who they are, you can really begin to think about what it is that you want to communicate and where it is that you want to communicate it. So essentially, you really got to think like they think. And then you got to know where they're looking for information and what kind of information that they're looking for. I mean, in a lot of cases, when we talk about marketing and advertising, it's about buy this now. What you really want to do, I think, is provide information. I mean, people aren't going to make an impulse decision 9 times out of 10 where they just walk in and say, oh, buy this now. They're going to want to know why that product's better. And we're in a very sophisticated marketplace now, with the evolution of information spread across the internet, right? That people want to know that what they're buying is going to provide the value that they're looking for. Okay,
that's interesting. And so going back to the channel picking, right? So,
right.
I love this old folks home analogy. But, let's say I am an old folks home and I'm like, well, I know that older people are looking for this, maybe people's kids also, right? Older people with kids. But what are some tools that I can use, or what are some methods that I can use to figure out, okay, well, I know people read magazines, right? But how do I figure out which ones they read? Or I know that they're online somewhere, but I need to figure out where, right? What are some tips for, not necessarily for, doing it right away, but like, what are are there any methodologies that you used, or is it just as simple as just do some qualitative and quantitative research or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to research, right? I think you just need to hit the pavement and start to better understand your market. So in the case of, if you're looking for a retirement home, you really, where are those individuals looking? They're probably an AARP, so AARP could be, a legitimate source, but you can also be creative, right? So one of, the ideas that I thought of, when thinking about retirement homes and, how you could market that, what if a retirement home were to create a marketing campaign targeted toward the grandchildren of people who are retiring to teach their grandparents social media so that they could communicate to them. So like you could build your entire campaign around that, and through the process of them interacting with your channel, right, then ultimately they're going to create exposure and go, oh, this is an organization that provides retirement services. I really like what they've done bringing me and my granddaughter closer together. I'm looking to retire. That might be a great place for me to do it. I like the way that they think. So you don't have to pigeonhole yourself, right? I mean, you can get creative. You can think about other ways that you can use existing channels, that everybody tends to lean toward. But the key is to make sure that your target audience is within that medium. That's the key, right? The grandchild is probably on Snapchat, as to where the grandparents are probably reading AARP magazine. Okay,
cool. So last thing, we have about a minute here, so good luck answering this in a minute. But when you start the plan, you have your success metrics, right? Mm-hmm. How does ROI come into play, and budgets, right? So how do you, you've probably had a budget already before we started this plan, right? But how do you calculate, what are some specific ways to calculate ROI, or what should you look for to kind of measure success?
Right. So your ROIs go back to your original objectives and goals, in the plan itself. So now we're talking about getting down to the tactical level, right? And I, again, being a fan of analogies, is I don't think you can eat the pie in one bite. So you need to look at each of those initial objectives that you set up in the beginning, and you need to create key performance indicators. So if you go back to, the 40 individuals that we were trying to get to become donors for nonprofit X, right? So that you've got 3 months to do that in. So you need to break that down into roughly 15 people per month, right? So you're going to break that down into a key performance indicator that we're going to, recruit 15 new donors within this month. And that's, when you've hit that, you're on the right track. If you're not hitting that, then that you're behind. And then you need to go back and evaluate what's working, what's not working, why it's not working. Real quickly, as an example, I created a great social media campaign that had about an 8-9% conversion, which is phenomenal. I mean, marketing average is about 2%. But ultimately, when they got to the landing page, it wasn't working out for them. So you'd need to fix the landing page.
Okay, love that. We could do a whole conversation about landing pages. Thanks so much, Jack. Really appreciate it. This is This Week in Marketing on WSRadio.com, hosted by the AMA San Diego. Thanks so much. Talk soon.
Can you imagine a world without children? A world where children don't play, or dream, or imagine?
At St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, we're working every day to find cures for diseases that strike down children, because we can't imagine a world without children. Can you?
Finding cures, saving children. St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. To learn how you can help, log on to our website, stjude.org.
Do you want to be a professional coach? Are you in business trying to make a real difference with people you manage or work with? Have you started a coaching practice that isn't quite getting off the ground? Get the skills you need to be a successful coach today with the Coaches Training Program from Accomplishment Coaching. The Coaches Training Program will show you how to help others focus and be more fulfilled. Whether you want to improve your company's bottom line or create a thriving coaching practice, Accomplishment Coaching can give you the distinctions and practices you need to coach others effectively today. Accomplishment Coaching has spent 6 years developing a cutting-edge coaches training program that will have you ready to coach people professionally in just 12 months, and you don't have to take time off work to do it. To find out more about the Coaches Training Program, just call 1-888-548-6813. That's 1-888-548-6813.
Tired of presentations with no impact, no inspiration, and no traction? Do dull speakers have you and your team disengaged and distracted by smartphones? Christopher McCullough brings energy, insights, and 2 decades of experience, delivered with punch, humor, and heart. Your team will leave energized, uplifted, and with a sense of purpose. Visit ChristopherMcCullough.com to bring some heat to your next speaking engagement. McCulloughe. ChristopherMcCullough.com.
Looking to be a successful entrepreneur? The virtual assistant industry continues to be a top choice for those looking to start their own business. The problem can be how to become a virtual assistant. Many turn to the Bible of the VA industry, the book Virtual Assistant, the series, and it's the perfect guide for office managers, executive assistants, and other administrative professionals looking to make the transition from employee to successful business owner. Go to vatheseries.com to get your copy today.
Hi, Scale listener. This is David Finkel, co-host with Jeff Hoffman of Scale Your Business. I wanted to let you know that our newest book, Scale, was just released, and to encourage you to get your copy. The book will give you 7 proven principles to grow your business and get your life back. Scale will help you work less by getting your business to produce more. Get your copy online or at your local bookseller. For more information, visit us online at scaleyourbusinesstoolkit.com.